Formula One just did something that could change the entire sport overnight. They rewrote the rules in the middle of the season, and the biggest winner is a team that's over 10% slower than the leader. Not 1%. Not 5. More than 10. That's the kind of gap that should end a season, not get rewarded. But instead, the FIA just handed Honda and Aston Martin millions in extra development, more testing time than anyone else, and a brand new category that didn't even exist before today. And now, rival teams are quietly furious, because what looks like help on the surface might actually decide who dominates the next era of Formula One. The real question is, was this a safety net, or a bailout that changes everything? To understand why this decision hit so hard, you have to go back to what ADUO was actually meant to be, because most people completely misunderstood it. On the surface, it sounds like a simple support system. A way to keep the grid competitive, to stop one engine from running away while others fall behind. But in reality, ADUO was never designed to save a team in crisis. It was designed to fine-tune small gaps. Think of it like a classroom where everyone is already close in performance. If one student scores slightly lower, they get a bit of extra time, maybe a bit of help, just enough to stay in the fight. That's what ADUO was. Small corrections. Controlled adjustments. Nothing dramatic. And the structure made that very clear. There were levels, each one carefully calibrated. If your engine was a few percent behind, you got a modest boost. If the gap was bigger, the support increased, but always within limits. Always predictable. Always contained. But here's where everything starts to shift. Because the system had a ceiling, and no one ever expected a manufacturer to smash straight through it. There was no plan for a gap beyond 10%. No safety net beyond that point. It simply didn't exist. And that tells you something important. The FIA never believed any engine program would fall that far behind under these regulations. That was the assumption. That was the risk every manufacturer accepted when they committed to this new era. But Honda didn't just miss the target. They missed the entire framework. And suddenly, ADUO wasn't enough. Because this wasn't a small correction anymore. This was a structural failure. And once that became clear, the FIA had two choices. Do nothing, and let the gap define the season. Or intervene, and risk changing the competitive balance entirely. They chose to intervene. But what they created in response wasn't just an extension of the system. It was something completely different. And that's exactly why the reaction across the paddock wasn't just surprise. It was anger. But here's where the story takes a turn that nobody inside the paddock was ready for, because the moment the FIA stepped in, the conversation stopped being technical and became political. At first, the change sounded almost reasonable. A new category for extreme underperformance. More support for those who clearly need it. A way to prevent one manufacturer from becoming irrelevant. But that's only the surface. Because when you look closer, the scale of what Honda just received changes everything. We're not talking about a small adjustment. We're talking about a massive increase in development power. More testing hours than any other category has ever allowed. A financial boost that didn't exist when the season began. And suddenly, the balance shifts. Because in Formula One, development is everything. It's not just about how fast you are today, it's about how fast you can become tomorrow. And this is where rival teams start asking uncomfortable questions. Because they built their engines under strict limits. They optimized every detail knowing there was a cap. A boundary they could not cross. That constraint shaped every decision. Now imagine watching another manufacturer receive extra time, extra resources, and extra flexibility, after those decisions have already been locked in. That's not just frustrating. It feels like the finish line just moved. And this is where the anger really starts to build. Not publicly, not loudly, but inside garages, behind closed doors, in conversations that never reach the cameras. Because no team wants to say it outright. But they're all thinking the same thing. If falling far behind unlocks more development, then what exactly is the incentive to get it right from the start? And that question is dangerous. Because Formula One is built on precision. On pushing limits within fixed rules. The moment those rules start adapting to performance gaps, the entire philosophy of competition starts to blur. But it doesn't stop there. Because the timing of this decision adds another layer that most people completely missed. The system wasn't just expanded. It was accelerated. Due to changes in the calendar, the first evaluation now happens earlier than originally planned, which means Honda gains access to these advantages sooner than expected. And that might sound like a minor detail. But in a sport where development cycles are measured in weeks, not months, it's huge. It means more time to recover. More time to experiment. More time to close a gap that should have taken much longer to fix. And this is where another piece of the puzzle appears. Because Honda isn't alone in this situation. Audi, another new engine manufacturer, is also expected to benefit from this new category. Now the narrative shifts again. This isn't just about one struggling team. It's about protecting new entrants, keeping them competitive, making sure they don't disappear before they even have a chance to fight. And that sounds like the right move, until you realize what it creates. Because now, the FIA isn't just regulating competition. It's shaping it, deciding who gets help, when they get it, and how much they receive. And for the teams at the front, the ones who got it right from day one, that changes everything. Because they're no longer just racing their rivals. They're racing a system that can evolve mid-season. And that realization is what turned confusion into frustration. And frustration into something much bigger. And this is where the pressure explodes into something much more visible, because once teams understood what this change really meant, the reaction started to ripple across the grid. Not in headlines, not in official statements, but in the small details that reveal everything. Engineers questioning timelines. Team principals choosing their words very carefully. Rivals suddenly paying very close attention to something they used to ignore. Because this isn't just about development anymore. This is about consequences on track. Think about it like this. An engine isn't just a number on a sheet. It affects everything. Straight-line speed, overtaking, defending, even how a driver manages the race. If you're down on power, you burn more energy trying to keep up. You push harder in corners. You stress the tires. You expose every weakness in the car. And that's exactly what's been happening to Aston Martin. The car hasn't just been slow. It's been unpredictable, difficult to control. A machine that doesn't respond the way a driver expects when they push it to the limit. Now combine that with a massive engine deficit, and you get a situation where even the best drivers can't compensate. No strategy fixes it. No setup fully hides it. It's a fundamental problem. But here's where things take another turn. Because when a team is struggling this much, development becomes more aggressive, more experimental, more willing to take risks. And now, with extra time, extra budget, and fewer restrictions, that process accelerates. Which means the same team that looks completely lost today could suddenly become unpredictable tomorrow. And unpredictability in Formula One is dangerous. Not because it creates chaos, but because it creates breakthroughs. And this is where one name changes the tone of the entire conversation. Adrian Newey. Because while everyone is focused on the engine deficit, on the rules, on the controversy, there's a parallel story quietly building in the background. A story about design. About long-term vision. About a man who has built championship-winning cars across different eras, different regulations, different challenges. And now, he's connected to a project that just received the biggest development lifeline on the grid. That's not a coincidence. That's a convergence. Because Newey doesn't work for short-term fixes. He works for complete transformations. And suddenly, all those extra testing hours, all that additional development freedom, they're not just about fixing what's broken. They're about building something entirely new. And this is where the tension across the grid becomes something deeper than frustration. It becomes concern. Because rival teams are no longer just looking at Honda as the weakest link. They're starting to see the possibility of what happens if that weakness turns into strength, faster than expected. And if that happens, then this decision won't just be remembered as controversial. It will be remembered as the moment everything started to shift. But the real twist hasn't even been fully understood yet. Because even with all this support, there's a limit that changes how this story actually plays out. But here's the part that completely flips the narrative. Because even with all this help, all these extra resources, all this attention, none of it fixes the one thing Honda doesn't have. Time. And in Formula One, time is the one resource you can't manufacture. Because once the season starts, everything is locked into motion. Development cycles, race calendars, upgrade windows, they don't wait for anyone. And this is where the reality hits. Even with the new category, even with the extra hours and budget, Honda cannot just build a new engine overnight. There's a strict process. First, the FIA has to officially confirm the deficit. Then, Honda has to design the upgrades, test them, validate them, and submit everything for approval. Only after that, can those changes actually reach the track. And that entire chain takes races. Multiple races. Which means something very uncomfortable for Aston Martin. They are stuck with this deficit for a significant part of the season. No immediate fix. No instant recovery. Just damage control. Race after race, trying to survive with a package that simply isn't competitive enough. And that creates a strange contradiction. Because on one side, rivals are angry about the extra support. But on the other, that support won't even change the current championship. It comes too late. The gap is too big. The calendar is too tight. So now the story splits into two timelines. the present, and the future. In the present, Aston Martin continues to struggle, fighting for minor points at best, managing limitations instead of attacking opportunities. But in the future, everything changes. Because all those extra development hours, all that additional budget, all the freedom to experiment. It's not really about fixing this car. It's about building the next one. And this is where the pieces finally start to connect. Because while other teams are refining already competitive engines, Honda is being forced to rethink everything. Architecture, energy deployment, efficiency, fundamental concepts that normally take years to evolve. And now, they're doing it under pressure, with more tools than anyone else. That combination is rare and dangerous. Because when a team has nothing to lose, and more freedom than before, they take bigger risks. They explore ideas others wouldn't touch. And sometimes, that's exactly how breakthroughs happen. So while the paddock is focused on fairness, on rules, on whether this decision was justified, there's a quieter, more important question forming underneath. What if this isn't about saving Honda? What if this is about accelerating them? Because if these changes land correctly, if the new engine solves even part of that massive deficit, then the team that looks completely out of the fight today could arrive next season with something no one fully understands yet. And that possibility is what makes this entire situation feel so unstable. Because Formula One has seen this before. A team struggles. They rebuild. They come back stronger. But rarely do they get this level of support while doing it. And that's why the real impact of this decision isn't what happens next weekend. It's what happens when all of this hidden development finally reaches the track.